Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Welcome to Northwood House. Tonight it's Halloween, All Hallows Eve. Tonight, the veil between this world and the next is at its very thinnest. My name is Tim Wander. Tonight I'm your host, your guardian, perhaps even your protector, as I take you through Northwood House by candlelight and tell you some of the stories and legends of the ghosts of Northwood House. There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy, wrote William Shakespeare. What most people don't realise is that Hamlet was speaking to a ghost. For thousands of years, ghosts have fascinated mankind, peoplekind. For tens of thousands of years, people have told stories around the campfires and around candles, because, let's be honest, for thousands of years, candles have lit the way. Candles are a way of joining ourselves to the past to illuminate the future. One thing you might not know is that once upon a time, candles were a ghost detector. If the flame burns blue, there's a ghost in the house. My name's Tim Wander. This is Northwood House. For over 300 years, this house has been a witness to history. Tens of thousands of souls have passed through, and we have to think that they must have left some imprint in these enormous walls. Just think for a moment what these walls have seen. In this room, every crowned head in Europe for over 200 years has come here to dance, to party, to enjoy life. And of course, at times they've come here to be sad and to mourn the passing of generations. And again, maybe that passing has left an imprint in the way we see the world. Just think what these windows have seen as they look over the Solent. Generations of men as they've gone to war, and in this very room, for 2 world wars, has been a hospital. People have enjoyed this room, they've danced in this room, and for a short while they even suffered in this room. So tonight, the Ghosts and Legends of Northwood House is a mixed match of stories. I've been involved with Northwood House as a project manager. I know every corner of this house in daylight and at night time. And I like to think that at night time, the ghosts of the past will talk to those who listen. So tonight on Halloween, as the world and the veil between this world and the other gets thinner, let's just think about the world of what most people would call the paranormal or the supernatural. Now those words are really quite easy to understand. Para, beyond, super, beyond, what is natural, what is known. If you go on the internet and you Google the word paranormal, there are over 170 different titles. Everything from alien abduction through telekinesis, through demonology, through 100 different events. Do we have headless horsemen here? Sadly, no. Do we have nuns wandering through as ghostly shapes? No. But we do have an awful lot of paranormal events, events that I can't explain, that happened here. By trade, I'm an engineer, a scientist. I have a technical background. I come at this as a skeptic. I don't have any view or understanding about what it all is. And tonight, sometimes I'm just going to say, you make your own mind up. So tonight is the story of all the tales I've been told in this house with its 300-year history from previous occupants. I've enjoyed hosting 10 or 12 paranormal evenings here. including from 2 universities who came along. They rigged this house like a science fiction set, and they were surprised by what happened next. We've had some very hardened ghost hunters. You'll all have seen ghost hunters on television. It's become an amazing pastime. In fact, at the moment, it is in the top 5 pastimes in this country to go and hunt ghosts. A recent survey said that over 50% of the population believe in ghosts, and 70% think they've seen one. Now, as we go into it, I think you might ask the question, do I believe in ghosts? Problem is, what is a ghost? If you take a traditional view of a ghost, it is a spirit of someone departed who's been trapped in this realm, who can't escape, who has unfinished business, who has places to travel and deeds to go. Every religion has its ghosts, and I'm going to leave that avenue there because tonight this is an evening of tales and stories and ideas and thoughts. So I'm not here to challenge anybody's belief system. Everyone has their own views. Maybe you might change after what you've heard tonight. But let's keep our views to yourself. So huddling close. Hopefully the ghosts will huddle in around us. And let's think what the world of the paranormal is all about. Some of the greatest minds in science have believed in ghosts. If you look back in history, Sir Oliver Lodge, Nikola Tesla, even Marconi himself really believed that in the great Victorian spiritualism revival that there was something beyond this realm. Many of them, including Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, spent much of their life trying to find something that was happen next. And I guess for all of us, that's a thought to happen. Perhaps the one I like most is a gentleman called Albert Einstein. Perhaps the greatest physicist, the greatest mind that's ever lived. Einstein, in a series of incredibly elegant calculations and treatises, came up with the view that matter cannot be destroyed. It can only be transmuted. It can only be converted. So when a living being dies, it does not disappear. The energy can only transform into another form. It won him the Nobel Prize, classic equations. But Einstein had a view for ghosts. He called them congealed light. What an amazing phrase that is from one of the greatest minds that ever lived. So do I believe in ghosts? Well, let's just refine it a little bit more, because do I think that the spirits of the departed are trapped in this realm? I think that's a subject for theologians and religious people. Do I believe that there are some paranormal, beyond normal effects, some phenomena occurring that as yet physics can't explain? Well, that's the question that we're going to look at tonight. Once upon a time, there was a phenomenon called ball lightning. Suddenly out of the corner of a room, a glowing ball would appear, an orb that would bounce across the floor and just disappear into a wall. If that had happened in a séance in 1940 or 1950, that would have been confirmation of ghosts. Now any physics laboratory in the world can recreate it. It's just a plasma discharge. So there is an ongoing battle between science and the paranormal, because empirically science demands that any effect, any phenomena, to be defined, to be understood, has to be repeatable. And if nothing, the world of the supernatural and ghosts is not repeatable. The problem is, if something happens, it happens once, and sometimes it happens out the corner of your eye. Sometimes a shadow over there. And part of the problem is, and it's the great problem with the ghost hunting shows and even with the paranormal groups here, is you get 20 people in a room like this, the lights are low, you have candles on, and they're all wishing and hoping, perhaps even praying in their own way, that something will happen. And sometimes it does. Now, maybe that is part of the effect. Maybe they've created it. Now, as an engineer, physicist, I think that's impressive and interesting, because that shouldn't happen. Here in the ballroom of Northwood House, I've seen it happen. Sitting where I am now, we, on the table here, we're trying to record with Winchester University. And whenever we tried to put the sound system on, there was just this enormous feedback. Then the batteries in the cameras went flat twice. So we sat here for an hour and nothing happened. In my normal style, I said, I've had enough, I'm going for coffee. At which point, something happened. Now, how do you find ghosts? How do you detect ghosts? The candle flame used to turn blue. Today's ghost hunters have a whole array of techniques. They have these. This is actually an EMF meter. Love this piece of kit. This detects ghosts. It's essentially an open crystal set. It detects radio waves from DC to daylight, as I would call it. Do I think this is credible? It's interesting. We've done experiments with this. The light flashes. I'll put that to one side. But what I will say is that, and in this very room, there is something that we call cat balls. It is the very simplest of device. There's one here, and here it is. It's just a plastic ball. Inside is an LED, two LEDs and a battery and a little motion sensor. There is nothing else involved in this ball. It's immune to radio interference, it's immune to everything. It can only be physically tapped to go off. So a lot of the ghost hunting clubs cover this floor in those. We put them on the table, and all science dictates that that should just sit there forever. You can clap your hands next to it, nothing happens. So we were sat here trying to record in a group, and then one of these falls on the floor, off a table. Why? Was it the people wishing and hoping? It happened in this room. It happens a lot. I was sat in the corridor just there, sat for 2 hours, drinking cold coffee. This floor in here is covered in 50 of these balls. Nothing happens. This floor is really quiet sound. It doesn't go off. I watched a ball there start flashing. Then the next one flashed. The next one flashed. And the one on the step there flashed. The only reason that can happen is something physically interfered with it and moved through this room. Of course, I moved in, I put my torch on, hit the lights in the ballroom. There's nothing here. I've seen it happen 3 times. I can't explain it. It's not the wind. Something moved through this room. But let's move the story on a little bit, because shapes you see out the corner of your eye, forms you see. I mentioned we had no headless horsemen, but we do have here another type of ghosts. So we have the ghosts, the spirits, and we won't talk too much about those tonight, but we have another ghostly form which is called residual ghosts. These are ghosts that essentially exist possibly in a parallel dimension, a parallel time. They appear or they reappear. They do the same thing. They're unaffected by their circumstances. It's perhaps the commonest ones. This is the grey lady at the window. Above us in the window here, if you're ever walking through Northwood Park late at night, look up at the window. You may see a grey man in a top hat. Generations of park goers have seen the man up there. It might be William Ward, might be George Ward, who used to own it. The form appears in the window upstairs. You think if one person's seen it, maybe it's a trick of the light, but to see it year after year is an interesting problem. But in this room, we have What is quite rare, we have what's called, in the lovely terminology of the ghost hunters, an FBA, a full body apparition. From the old dining room on my right, where the Georgians, the Regency, revellers through the Victorian age have parted, a shape moves through this room. It's the form to my left and disappears. You say it's a trick of the light. Well, there's a couple of problems. The first problem is the alarm system in this room can see her. And most people think it is a her. She's been seen in several rooms in this house. We now believe it's actually matron from the First World War because one of the members of staff here is now left, was at the top of the stairs in Northwood House. He looks down, he sees a lady at the top of the stairs. Now, that's a private part of the room, it's staff only. She was dressed in a floppy hat and an apron, a bag over her shoulder, and she walked just through the corridor here. And he went down to tell her because the door's locked. And when he got down there was nobody there. He rang me. I was in Australia at the time and said, I've just seen matron. Would she have been there with her white bib? I went, yes. Welcome to the ghosts of Northwood House. Several people have seen her walk across the corridor here. She comes down the stairs and goes to the office over there, which we found out last year used to be her office. Several years ago, some members of staff were outside. They were setting up a pavilion for one of our great events here. They looked in here and they saw matron walk across this room. There was a problem. The house was locked and it was alarmed. They come in, there's nobody here. Tens of people have seen matron walk across here. We actually caught her on camera during a paranormal event, walking across the corridor as a light. You can see the dress below her. And we might even show that we'll cut that in the film later. And all you can hear on the playback is people just go, oh my God. Welcome to the Ghosts of Northwood House.
It's fine place.
No, 100%. These guys were watching it on camera and they ran straight down. Tim, what are you saying about the door?
Ready to go. Okay.
Oh, amazing!
So there are many tales to tell in this house. There's been some tragic events just out here on the lawn. Lieutenant Sutton, December the 10th, 1817. He got into an altercation in a pub in Cowes with Major Lockyer. They were both mariners, they're both sailors. They ended up having drunk too much, storming up the hill, nominating their seconds. They loaded their flintlock pistols. They went back to back just outside this door. Major Lockyer turned a step early and shot Lieutenant John Sutton through the heart. He died on the steps of this ballroom. George Ward was not happy as the owner. Lieutenant Sutton is buried in St Mary's churchyard just across the way. Sometimes at night, people see an orb floating between the steps and the graveyard. I've not seen it. But what we look outside there, what people have seen is children who play in the park. Numerous people have seen children playing in the park. There's some lovely plane trees here. They're absolutely beautiful with branches. People are walking their dogs. It's a fantastic park to walk your dogs here at Northwood House. But usually at dusk, 5:30, it's not dark, it's not spooky, it's just the evening. They've walked around the corner and they've seen children playing in the trees. There's a problem. There's a strangeness because they're dressed out of time, as almost time has slipped. And one of the phenomena that you'll find is time slips, where previous time, past time, will break into this time to appear for a moment. Now maybe that's the origin of ghosts. Maybe there is a reality alongside us, and maybe the past can enter for a while because we can always step back into the past. So maybe we are breaking into the world. Maybe we are ghosts in their time, but I'll leave that to writers more qualified for me. The ghost in the tree. If you ever walk through the park, you'll see the Victorian children playing in the trees, laughing and joking at dusk. Welcome to the ghost of Northwood House. I think as you look around these walls, the other thing we find in this house across the many rooms is another phenomena. No, we don't have headless horsemen, but we do see, and it's quite a common problem. I use the word problem, it's not. There is nothing malevolent, nothing dark about this. I find it fascinating. People, their reactions when they see it, they go from stark fear to giggling to my don't believe what I'm seeing. We get sudden temperature drops. Now, it's an old building. It has rattly walls and drafts, but it's not too bad. We've worked very hard to keep it dry, but there are rooms in this house, including in this corner behind me, where the temperature will drop suddenly. It'll drop 5 degrees. Oh my word. Out of sight, my cat ball has just flashed. It's not something that can happen. It's welcome to Northwood House. I'm not moving. I can clap my hands, I can bang my feet, it won't go off. Welcome to the ghosts of Northwood House. I can't explain it, but it happens from time to time. Sometimes I've spread them out here and sat here. You can see it for hours, and that's the problem with paranormal. It never occurs when you want it to. But on this night of all night, if it's going to happen, it will happen. So we've talked about different types of ghosts. People break it down, other types of ghosts. There are crisis ghosts where people see the spirits of recently departed loved ones. And again, we're not going to dwell on that because that's for another time and another place. What we also have is effects where things disappear and appear. The technical term is translocation. It's where things appear. So in Northwood House, especially in the cellars beneath me, and beneath me are 14,000 square feet of cellars that date back to 1720. Things will just appear. Things disappear. Keys disappear and reappear. We get coins. I use an office up here. I went home one night. I came back in the morning, opened the door, and on the floor is an 1832 half Dutch guilder. Where's that come from? It's just appeared. I actually keep it in my briefcase as a memento. It's appeared from somewhere. The bottom of the steps. Here, coins. In one afternoon, 3 pennies appeared. Myself and then the house manager thought we were actually making fun of each other. The only people down there, the only people with the keys were myself and the house manager. Coins appear, marbles appear, and actually seashells. Where do they come from? Do they drop out of a parallel universe? Welcome to the ghosts of Northwood House. So all these effects are fascinating. Are they scary? No, they're interesting. I was talking about temperature drops before we were perhaps visited. So I've seen this room full of digital thermometers. Sits at about 16, 17, it's quite pleasant. Suddenly, the temperature will drop 5, 6 degrees, and it's instantaneous. You can feel the atmosphere come in. Even feel the breath as you breathe out, then it will pass. So what? If I look at it as a scientist, as an engineer, do I believe this is the spirits coming to visit us? No, I don't think so. This is a personal view, and everything I'm telling you tonight is a personal view. I think there is a possibility that a building like this has the ability to record. Now, to a modern generation, you are long past cassette tapes and magnetic tape. But this building is built out of sandstone and limestone and iron ore. This house is a magnetic entity in its own right. Just maybe, there is a possibility that when people are upset or emotionally charged or they're fighting, this building can record it. And maybe on a special night, like tonight, for a while it will play back and the lady will walk, matron will visit us. Maybe that's the reason, or maybe it's some... Oh, there we go. And the ball flashes. Do you know that's actually put a chill down my neck, that has? Welcome to the Ghosts of Northwood House. See, I'm looking into the darkness now, where we all have to look sometimes. And we all wonder what is out there, what is waiting around the corner. We all want to know what comes next. And maybe all this gives us a chance. Ah, my word, I think I'm going to have to pick this up because this is now starting to... The ghosts of the past will listen to all who's... The ghosts of the past will listen to all who... Whoa! The ghosts of the past will speak to all who listen. There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. So I think as we move forward, what I intend to do tonight is we're going to visit one or two other places within Northwood House. This is the main ballroom. I say this has been a centre for dancing for 200 years, the refectory, the dining room to my right. We're going to go and reset in a couple of places here. I'm going to tell you a few more stories, a few more events, a few more ghost stories. And we'll then see what you think about the ghosts of Northwood House. Well, now we're at the very centre, the nexus of Northwood House. Northwood House is actually built on the shape of a cross. We're actually at the centre of Northwood House and the centre of the house that used to stand here from the 1730s, which was called Bellevue. Beautiful view. And in this area here is strange. Now, the well-known 60s architect Nicholas Pevensey said Northwood House was strange on the outside, but even stranger on the inside. Welcome to Egypt Corner. This purports to be 3,500 years old. This is a funeral pyre from ancient Egypt, but it's actually a Georgian copy from 1832. But what it does have is something strange. Underneath is a void which doesn't line up with any space we can find in the cellars beneath. And this has been the centre for some really interesting effects. Matron walks across the corridor here to her office just over there. A paranormal group back in the 90s was setting cameras up looking towards Egypt Corner, and out of this wall a shape and a face appeared. We won't talk too much about it because one of the people recognised the face that came through the wall of someone who'd recently been departed. The face appeared and then went back into the wall. I was here and we set a camera up here looking down St Mary's corridor, and we caught Matron walking across the corridor. It tripped the motion sensors and we saw her. What's interesting about here is there's the there is closed circuit TV, which is actually tripped by motion. And in the early hours of the morning, about 1 or 2 o'clock, there is a phenomenon, one of those many I mentioned, called orbs. They're glowing orbs. People dismiss them as dust particles that are catching the light. But we will see orbs that really just appear in Egypt Corner, and they will just head down the main corridor towards the ballroom. And if they were dust particles that are caught on breeze, you'd expect them just to keep going. But sometimes they'll turn left towards the rotunda. Sometimes they'll turn right. Sometimes 2 glowing orbs will change direction and part. Do you think, okay, what is this about? About 4 years ago, there was 2 old ladies who'd missed their taxi. They were waiting here. We let them wait here because it was raining outside. They'd never been to the Isle of Wight. They'd never been to Northwood House. They'd actually been to a church function. They were sat just here. And we were talking to them, and they were saying that, what a lovely house and the rest of it. And they started to smile. And they said, have you any idea what is happening in this house, in this place? They said they'd never been here before. They said, they actually used the phrase, this is a psychic Leicester Square. There are forms and ghosts and spirits all around us here, all congregating here. And a friend of mine was stood here, and they said, there's someone behind you, smiling. And they described the person. The person involved knew who it was. Welcome to the Ghosts of Northwood House. This is the centre of the house. We're now going to move down to what we now know as the library. But there's been many things in the past. And we're going to head down St Mary's corridor. We'll see what we can see. Welcome to the library, as it's now called. This amazing octagonal room is probably my favourite in the entire house. This is the only room we know was drawn and built by the hand of John Nash, the famous royal architect. He built Buckingham Palace and Regency Street and among other things. For a long time this was George Ward's private offices. A door now blocked up through here. Took him through. In later times, this was actually the room where they made ice sculptures for the Victorian parties. This room has a presence, it has an aura. That's the thing about haunted buildings. People have different views. Some people don't believe, some people are very susceptible. I remember my mother, we once went to Isaac Newton's house and she was so terrified she couldn't go in. I then asked one of the guides, is this house haunted? She said she couldn't tell me. But when you walk down the stairs, please hold on to the handle tight. Here at Northwood House, in this room, we have one occurrence which has been repeated many times. So Northwood House has been many things in its history. It's been a hospital through 2 world wars. And it's really in the Second World War that our story takes place. For a time, this was a huge army camp. 1,000 soldiers were based here, fire engines, cadaver dogs. And in May 1942, there was 2 evenings of heavy bombing. Over 8,000 houses were destroyed. Nearly 200 people were killed. The casualties were brought to Northwood House. And for a while, this story had no background in fact, because jump forward to the 1980s, and this room is now the registry office. People are getting married in here every day. And there was the audience sat here, And in the middle of the service, a lady stands up, white-faced and ashen, because she's seen in this room not a ghost, but an image. Maybe it's a breakthrough from a past time. And what it is a series of carpenter's trestles across this room on which are lined up coffins. And this is in 1980. She actually runs out. She's so upset. That image has been seen several times by people in this room since then. I was doing a walk, a tour, which wasn't even a ghost evening. And I was talking to someone who remembered that night. They were just 10 years old. They're actually in the Boy Scouts. And they basically said, yes, in this room, those people who could not be identified, the coffins were lined up here for 3 days and 3 nights before they were then taken on handcarts from Northwood House across Cowes to be buried in Northwood Cemetery, where they still lie today in a long grave, 29 in a row. He was a Boy Scout, 12 years old. What's amazing is there was no vehicles, no fuel available after a major bombing raid. So the carts were pushed by Boy Scouts who were 12 and 13 years old, who then dug the communal grave for all the casualties. The ghosts of the past will talk to anybody who listens. Was that a breakthrough from a previous time? She knew nothing about the house, she knew nothing about it. But in this room, that hugely traumatic period can replay in these walls. Also in this room, we get where I'm sitting now, and in that corner over there, sudden, incredible temperature drops. Literally, in an instant, the temperature will fall. And sit. Digital thermometer here will read 13 degrees, and the one here will read 19. And then gradually this one will come back up. One of the devices the ghost hunters use to look for spirits, the EMF meter, when that temperature drops, those meters go mad. The cat balls will flash. And some effect is happening. There's also a device which has many different names, but essentially it's a very sensitive proximity meter, 2 aerials. It puts a magnetic electric field out, and if anything goes near it, it's basically the sensors you'll see in alarms and lights. We've put them in the middle of this room, and you can't set them, because whatever is happening in this room is moving. There is energy moving through this room. Maybe it's the line of coffins. If you try and put the motion sensor at the doorway here, it just trips. The alarm goes off. You reset it, you get halfway up the corridor, it resets. We've actually given up putting an alarm sensor in this room because you can't get it to stay set. What's it all about? I have no idea. Welcome to the Ghosts of Northwood House. Well, we're now standing in an area that most people don't get to see. This is the old operating theatre. This is the only country house in England that still has its original operating theatre. For 2 nights in May 1942, in this area here, it was a scene of chaos, unimaginable panic and pain and agony, because everyone came through the door to my right was triaged here. Those who didn't make it went down to the library. Those who needed surgery went into the operating theatre. Those who went to the wards could go on to the main ballroom. Many groups have spent time here at Northwood House, and not much has happened, but on just a few nights, over in the back door, they heard scratching. Then we heard sighs, and phenomena where you hear noises are quite common. But the one that really threw me was one of the other devices that you use for detecting ghosts has got a very posh name, but I call it a speak and spell machine. A speak and spell machine. Imagine a machine has 10,000 words in it. It cycles round with a little display. You switch it on, and the idea, fanciful as it may seem, is that that machine can be influenced by whatever is in the room to send you a message. The group that come here had used this for 10 years, had no effect. We sat here, and what was interesting was it started after about half an hour. There was orbs, just glowing balls that floated through the room. And they decided they'd put this machine out its case, they put it down there, and they switched it on, it went beep. And they all said it would do nothing. And as we stood here, it went beep, and a word appeared. And they went, oh, must be a flat battery. And as we walked towards it, for the first time ever, another word appeared. I've spoken to them recently, and in all the time, it's only happened here outside the old operating theatre. And it said, run, now! Well, there are some parts of Northwood House that most people don't get to see. This is the old servants' wing. There's been nobody really use these rooms really since 1905, when the nuns left. This was a convent, a strict, closed Benedictine order for over 5 years. These were nuns' cells. The lights would burn 24 hours, gas lights, so they could read the Bible out loud, and a bell would ring in the distance. This room, which is just an anonymous room, is recognised by all the people who have come to visit Northwood House as a special room. There are people who are very sensitive to paranormal, supernatural, mediums and psychics, and I have the greatest respect for their beliefs and their views, and some of us are more sensitive to other things, but in this room, I've known them not be able to enter. In this room, some events have happened that really have thrown me. Everything we spoke about so far, temperature drops and shapes and balls moving, is an interesting physical phenomena, and even cameras tripping is interesting, but there is another type of ghost, which is usually called an intelligent ghost. And this really does start to challenge everything that you know as a way of looking at the world. So in this room, over the years, many groups have gathered, and there's been strange effects. There's been scratching and tapping. People have tapped on the wall, and things have tapped back. There's been scratching and noising, and then that's all interesting. There's a chest of drawers over here where the doors swing open and can't be shut, and various just effects. I guess the first one is at the window here, because just across the way is the community hall. And over many years, people who have been leaving the community hall have looked up and they've seen in this window the shape of a young girl, 10, 11 years old. So much so that a few of them actually rung the house and said, you've locked someone in the old servants' quarters. But of course, there's nobody here. So a number of groups have come in here and identified the fact that this room is haunted by at least 3 entities, and 2 of them are children. We know their names. One's called Tom and one's called Anne. They exist in this room somehow. People can sense them, they can feel them. So I came here 3 years ago with a group, and really I was here as the host and the chaperone and trying to we had to break the transmission because some reason, something decided they didn't want to hear my words, and we lost the camera feed. We're talking about water divining. So the rods are moving, yes and no. And we stood in this room, and I would argue that for 20 minutes or so, with 8-10 witnesses, I held an historical Q&A. And to this day, I have no concept of what the hell happened in this room. So I basically, the classic question, is there anybody here? I didn't say yes. You feel the room going cold. Everybody in the room was aware of it. The temperature gauge up there drops 5 degrees, like that. There is a feeling in the room, everybody huddles together. Well, one of my family here remembers it extremely well. And suddenly, we are talking. We basically say, are you children? Yes. We ask them to spell their names. You go A, and it moves yes. And it moves to N, yes. Annie and Tom. What's interesting is those names have been given to me by previous people who've been in this room, but this was a new group. And we start to ask them what was going on here. What? Are we talking to ghosts? So I say, do you know Northwood House? And they go, no. Do you know this house as Bellevue? Yes. Now that's interesting because I'm the only historian in the room. Nobody else would know this house as Bellevue. That home was lost in 1805. And we're asking them a series of questions. We find out that their father worked here. He worked in the stables across the road. They didn't die here. They died at sea because their father was a fisherman. At which point the lady running it said, is anyone related? Are you related to anyone in this house? And that's a really important point apparently, because if it's a yes, you stop and you walk away. The answer was no. Then the room changes. Two people. The first thing is to say is that we're having huge difficulty filming in this room tonight. For the third time, something has decided that it would flatten batteries, which were new. We've had to reset twice. Welcome to Northwood House. So in this room, over a period of time, strange things happened. And at this moment in time, something into this room, purported to enter this room, pushed people together. The girl stood here, actually let out a squeal because something, she later thought it was a child, grabbed her leg as if they were afraid. The girl who was holding the rods started to shake, got very upset, and for a little while we said, who are you? This is my house. So I said, who are you? It was quiet and nothing. I said, could you spell your name? And it spells out O-G-L-A-N-D-E-R. That's a strange name. Nobody knew it. I happen to know that Oglander built this house in 1743. How is that the only person here who'd know that? So I started asking questions. I said, have you heard of Queen Victoria? No. Well, that makes sense. Victoria didn't come to the throne until 1839. Have you heard your king is mad? I didn't know. I said, have you heard that there's been a revolution in France and they're cutting off people's heads? Yes. Just think about that for a moment. I'm here placing ghosts in time. One thing is, this wing wasn't built in 1800. This wing is built in 1838. I can't understand. I can't explain that. Well, what I can tell you is that this story has a second half, because after 20 minutes, it got so intense, we decided to call it to an end and we left. We went back and I went back to the office and had coffee. And to this day, I don't know what went on. A couple of months later, my daughter was here. She lives in Spain. She lives in a small Spanish village. And she said, I'd like to come to a ghost evening. I said, okay. They came back down here with a different team. And I said, well, I'm not going to go because maybe all those people wishing and hoping and praying, maybe I was driving the results because it was an incredible evening. So my daughter comes back about an hour later and I said, how did it go? She said, it was really interesting, Dad. She said, we talked to a ghost. Her name was Elizabeth. And she said something interesting. She said, what's the Spanish flu? Because she lives in Spain, perhaps more Spanish than English now. She went, I said, why do you ask? She said, oh, because this girl, Elizabeth, she came here as a nurse and she died of the Spanish flu. She came here to look after the orphans and the children because their parents had died of the Spanish flu. And I went, well, that's really interesting. And she said, I said, do you know anything else? She said, oh, yes, she came from Wales. She said, what's a Snowdon? I went, well, it's a mountain. She said, oh, she came from a village north of Snowdon called Rudu. I went onto my phone and there is a village called Reldau, 2 miles north of Snowdon. How does that come through in an abandoned servants' quarters in Northwood House? Through people who had no idea of the history, the fact that this house for a long time treated the Spanish flu 100 years ago. The last great pandemic we faced in 1919, and that down in the cellars here, 60, 100 people died of that dreaded disease. And I said to her, what do you think? She said, it was interesting and it was very sad. And I said, welcome to the Ghost of Northwood House. Way back at the beginning of this evening, I talked about rips in time. Maybe past ages were breaking through. If anything, this is a perfect example. We're now in the cellars of Northwood House, nearly 14,000 square feet. When you walk down into the cellars here, you are literally time travelling. You're walking back in time. The floor here dates from the original Bellevue house. This is 1730, 300 years of history in these cellars. These cellars have been many things. They were wine cellars for great parties. During the Victorian age, this was the kitchen, the centre of hundreds of people scurrying around, all lit by tallow candles, preparing and cooking for massive grand balls in the rooms above. But our story really starts in March 1918. Northwood House has been converted and has been running for 4 years as a voluntary auxiliary dispatch hospital, a VAD hospital. Thousands of troops. In March 1918, there was a flu. It's called trench flu, starts in Northern Europe. People get sick, but they last for about 3 or 4 days to get over it. No one quite knows where it starts. It probably started in a training camp in America. By September 1918, people are getting very sick. By November 1918, as the armistice, the 11th hour of the 11th day, 1918, that brings the First World War, this mass conflict of slaughter, to an end, the world faces a new challenge. During the Great War, what a mad title that is, during the First World War, an estimated 20 million soldiers and civilians lost their life in that conflict. In the next 2 years, an estimated 70 million people will die. In fact, some estimates are now putting that over 100 million people. To put that in effect, that is a fifth of the world's population will die of something that becomes known as the Spanish flu. The only reason it's known as the Spanish flu is because Spain's newspapers, the King Carlos caught the Spanish flu and they reported it. Whereas because it was considered to be bad for morale, the rest of the world's media blacked out the Spanish flu. Probably the first truly great pandemic we'd faced since the Black Death of the 16th century. The Spanish flu was horrendous. It actually hit the young. Children caught it but were not particularly ill. The elderly caught it but were recovered, to my point. But if you were between the ages of 18 and 30, the mortality rate was 1 in 5. They always said that you'd have breakfast with your family and lunch with St. Paul. It was a terrible death. You basically drowned in your own sputum and coughing lungs. Spanish flu came to the Isle of Wight through the port of Ryde in 1919. May. It hit Cowes a month later. Northwood House, with its huge cellars here, which stay at a constant temperature, was the obvious place, because then we didn't know what it was just a plague. So all the Spanish flu victims were brought down here, laid on the floor to spend their last agonising hours. Are the cellars haunted? Yes, we have sounds and scraping. But can buildings remember? Do these walls remember everything that happened down here? For a brief moment in time, a brief moment in history, Northwood House became part of the world pandemic. In 2020, we're facing the same thing, but not to such a great extent. It came in waves. The second wave was in end of 1919 into 1920, and then it just disappears. Northwood House plays its part and may be the imprint, but remember the room in the old servants' quarters. Remember Elizabeth, the Welsh nurse, who perhaps still waits here, and the children who wait with them. But what's also interesting about the cellars here is that we have one other ghost which has been reported here for over 100 years. Behind me. We have a pirate. He's known as Tom. People have seen him. Classic pirate, striped jumper. He can often be heard moving barrels around late at night. When there's nobody down here, you can see the wear marks in the floor from the barrels. So when I first came down here with the then house manager, he said, always be polite to the ghosts of Northwood House. Some time ago, someone was doing a guided tour down here and they deliberately went out of their way to antagonise the ghosts of the past. The atmosphere in this room dropped, the temperature dropped, and they had to get out. Tom, the friendly pirate ghost, is here. Maybe he still waits. Welcome to the Ghosts of Northwood House. So here we are back at the beginning. Well, firstly, I hope you've enjoyed the stories tonight. Hopefully it's been an interesting journey through the history and the events of Northwood House. It's a great house, it's a warm house, it's a friendly house. Thank you so much to the directors and the volunteers and the staff that we were able to do this in the middle of another world pandemic. Just so I get a few family members here to make this all happen. So I now have to shut up, go through all the corridors on my own, lock the cellars, lock the rooms. That's an interesting one. So I lock the main doors here. Sometimes the old caretaker locks them for me. We've heard him around, we hear his keys jangling. And another effect you get in paranormal are smells. So in the corridor here we can smell flowers, and there are flowers in this house from time to time. But we also smell tobacco, very strong old tobacco. And nobody smoked in this house for many, many years. So I like to think it's the caretaker who will watch over us and make sure I lock up correctly. Did I mention welcome to the Ghosts in Northwood House? So look, on this hallowed evening, don't have nightmares. It's a friendly world. It's a world that is there. It's a world beyond normal. We've touched it. If you're interested, sign up with a paranormal group. If you're prepared, if you want to keep it at arm's, then that's probably a good thing. There are many other forms of trying to talk to the other side. There are Ouija boards and planchettes, and I will tell you now, I'm not a fan. I've seen that. I've seen it here. I've seen it at other places, and I will not get involved because Michael Bentine, some of you remember Michael Bentine, one of the goons. He did a great series called Point Time. He was a great believer in the other side. He'd seen it in World War II, where crews of bombers that he was debriefing, the faces would turn to skulls as they went out on the mission, and they never came back. After a year, it gave him a nervous breakdown. He called it a door marked summer, that you can open it, you can look in, and sometimes things will come in briefly to talk to us. He also suggests that there are other doors that are perhaps best left closed. Thank you for listening. Good night. My name's Tim Wonder, and may the ghosts stay with you, look after you, and watch over you.